Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Speaking to Spirits series on YouTube. If you like what you see, please subscribe. Tonight, we are very much honored to have the spirit of Mahatma Gandhi with us tonight, the great pacifist that was responsible for getting India its independence from Great Britain. So, without any further delays, why don't we get started? I know he's here with us. We've been speaking with him, and Connie will begin to ask him his questions.
Okay. Gandhi, you were born Hindu. Could you explain your concept of God at that time?
The concept of God in the Hindu religion varies from what Christians would think of as God. Keep in mind that the Hindu religion predated when Jesus walked the earth and created Christianity. We believe in reincarnation, and we believe in many things that you have been speaking to the people.
Okay. How does it differ now that you're on the other side?
It doesn't really differ that much. Now that I'm on the other side, I understand truly how things work. We see the miracle of reincarnation, and we see how God uses it to attempt to aid humans in their evolution. Now that I'm over here, I can see much more clearly, and I can understand things much more clearly.
Are you a member of the soul family of God?
Yes, I have been honored to have served our Lord and God in many, many lifetimes previous to the one as Gandhi. He, just as you and Connie are members of the soul family, I understand what it is to serve the words of God.
Did you ever walk the earth with Jesus?
I was blessed to have been chosen to have walked at the same time that he did. I was one of the assistants and followers. I worked with Peter in his ministries, although my name at the time was Isaiah. My name has not been incorporated in any of the Gospels that have survived.
Could you tell us about that prior life?
I was introduced to Jesus after the first year of his ministries. We were told that this person was the Son of God and was capable of creating miracles. I listened to him speak and approached him and asked him if I could join him in his ministry. He graciously accepted me, and even though I was not one of his closest associates, I was blessed to have been able to serve him.
Did you reincarnate between that life and the one as Gandhi?
Yes, I have returned several times. The one time that I returned on a mission for God was in the 13th century. He felt that it was time that humans started to make advances in their culture, and I returned as a Catholic bishop. At that time, the Catholic Church controlled Christianity, and we felt that I could have a great impact by returning at that time.
Will you describe heaven for us?
Heaven is the most magnificent place. As you advance in the realms, it becomes better and better. By the time you reach the upper realms, you will be amazed at what you can do with your soul energies. You can always travel to a lower level. If your family or associates are on those levels, you can go visit them. You can travel anywhere you want to go simply by thinking that that is what you want to do. It is truly indescribable. The human emotions and mind are incapable of fully comprehending the grandeur of heaven.
Could you describe your childhood for us?
My childhood was not very easy. I was born of Indian descent, as you know. My mother was a very, very special person. She helped me formulate a lot of the ideals of which I would follow during the path of my lifetime.
Why did you become a vegetarian?
I felt that animals had souls as well, and that I did not want to interfere with their lives. I knew that animals reincarnated, as did humans, but I felt that eating the flesh of animals was not part of God's will. I tried to always be a vegetarian throughout my life so that I would not be directly responsible for the death of animals.
Why was your attempt at establishing a law practice in Bombay not a success?
I had a hard time questioning individuals. I was actually a little bit backwards when it came to speaking with others. I found that I could not forcibly interrogate those that I needed to interrogate, and it was very difficult to be an attorney with those characteristics.
Yeah. So why did you go to South Africa?
I was offered a legal position in South Africa, and since I was failing at what I was doing in Britain, I decided to take the job. It was quite an experience.
Could you describe your life when you were there?
South Africa looked down on any people with color of their skin, because of the color of their skin. It was almost like having a caste system. Because I was Indian, my skin was dark, and the white majority of South Africa controlled the anyone with a black skin pigmentation. I felt that it was important to try to gain freedoms for anyone in South Africa with dark skin colors.
So why did you side with the British in the Boer War?
I had been raised in Great Britain and felt a great alliance to that country. Even though I sympathized with the Boers and felt that they were being taken care, or that they were being abused by the British, I also felt that it was my responsibility to help them in the war effort. So therefore I tried to get individuals of Indian descent to fight on the side of the British. I remained nonviolent and did not participate in any actions that would ever harm anyone.
Why did you subscribe to nonviolent protests?
I always felt that nonviolence would lead to more success than any violent attempts to overthrow a government. At the time I lived, the British Army was one of the strongest in the world, and they were quite capable of overcoming any type of violent dissent. They truly did not know how to handle those of us that used nonviolent techniques.
Okay. What was your role in World War I?
In World War I, I helped to recruit people of Indian descent to fight against the German occupation of Europe. I know that what I did would go against the principles, my nonviolent principles, but once again I felt an allegiance to Great Britain.
So why did you think India should be independent from Great Britain?
As I grew older, I began to realize just how much the Indian people were being abused by British rule. They would tax the Indian people, and they would abuse them and not allow them to maintain any positions of importance in governing their country. I felt that it would be very important that I try to help the Indian people gain freedom and the ability to govern themselves.
Why do Hindus and Muslims not get along?
Sadly, it has been since almost the beginning of time that Hindus and Muslims have not been able to settle their differences. Just the same as there are currently Muslim radicals, there were people during my time as members of the Muslim faith that felt that they were superior to the Hindu people. There was much, at times we would get along with the Muslim population when we were attempting to reach the same political goals. But there were also times that they would drastically differ with my nonviolent policies.
What was the Rowlatt Act?
The Rowlatt Act was a great inconvenience to the Indian people. I felt that it put undue burdens upon them, and the passing of that act I tried to oppose. When it was passed, I worked very hard to get it repealed. It was part of it was very difficult, but I found that as more and more people were aware of my nonviolent positions, I gained political power, and it gave me the ability to negotiate with the British at times.
Okay. How effective was the civil disobedience movement?
There were times that it was not very effective, and there were times that it was immensely effective. At times, the British government would brutally beat upon those of us that were in nonviolent protests. The newspapers of the world would take pictures and write articles about the British brutality, and worldwide reaction would take place, and As a result, there would be pressures brought from individuals in other countries to stop the violence. As it turned out, I was correct, and nonviolence was the most effective means to gain what we wanted to in India.
What is your opinion of Winston Churchill?
Winston Churchill, to say the least, never cared for me. He felt that what I was doing was destroying the British colonization in India. He felt that my movement should have been controlled through violent means if necessary. Winston Churchill strongly felt that British colonial rule was the best answer for India. Obviously, I totally disagreed with him and used my nonviolent techniques to gain what I wanted, which was the Indian people to form their own government.
Do you see Winston Churchill now that you're on the other side?
We avoid each other over here. While there is no evil, there is still dislike among souls in heaven. We find it is much easier just to avoid each other on this side.
What is your view of socialism?
Socialism is a terrible form of government. It has caused the death of millions and millions of people. Perhaps the best example of the dangers of socialism today is what is taking place in Venezuela. The people there are being destroyed by it. It is always a fact that people in power try to control those that are not in power. And socialism gives them the means to do it, since government controls basically all aspects of their lives. There are people in your country today that are speaking of socialism. It is a terrible concept for your country. Hopefully, wiser heads will prevail in your elections.
Yes. Okay, why did you support opposing the British war effort in World War II?
By the time World War II came around, I had changed my opinion. The British had such an influence over the Indian people that I felt it would be best to try to remain neutral. The Japanese were posing a threat to the entire Asian continent, and I felt that if the Indian people were to get strongly involved with fighting World War II, that the Japanese would possibly invade India, and that would have had disastrous results on my people.
Okay. What is your opinion on separating India and Pakistan?
I did not feel that the separation of Hindus in India and Muslims in Pakistan was a good idea. I felt that the best chance was for the two cultures to intermingle, and perhaps that through that intermingling they would get along. As you can see, India and Pakistan have become two bitter enemies because of the decisions made by the British government. The hatred is so strong at this time that I am not seeing any logical answer on peace coming to the region.
Sad. Why did Godse assassinate you?
He was a very radical person and felt that what I was doing was not the best for the Indian or the Muslim people. He had much hatred in his heart and unfortunately ended my life before I could complete my final plans.
What is your opinion of the current rioting in Singapore?
The current rioting in Singapore has the potential to become very, very violent. The Chinese government is fully capable of destroying the movement through violence. I think they would be much more effective if they maintained a truly nonviolent method of trying to prove their point. It will be very hard for the Chinese government to interfere violently if the individuals are not taking any violent steps towards the government. I hope that the people of Singapore will be able to persevere and maintain the individual rights that they are attempting to maintain. China would like nothing better than to exert their force and will upon Singapore.
What is your opinion of the modern Indian government?
There are many things that the modern Indian government is doing to facilitate violence throughout the region. I would much prefer to see them take a step back and attempt to negotiate the problems that they have with Pakistan. I would like to see them maintain or try to originate some type of answer in Kashmir. That is the place where there's definitely the potential for increased violence. As you know, both Pakistan and India have nuclear weapons. It would be a catastrophe if either of the two countries were to use them.
What should the Jews have done during the Holocaust?
That is a very, very difficult question to answer. Perhaps in that instance, they should have tried to resist the violence of the Nazi government. In most instances, the Jewish people acquiesced to the Nazis without understanding the true extent of the evil that the German government at the time had in store for them. While I advocate nonviolence, I think in this instance it would have been better if the Jewish people would have formed armed resistance and drew the true attention of the world to their plight. The Nazis were very effective in keeping what they were doing a secret. Violent resistance would have at least brought more attention to the situation and perhaps brought other countries into the war sooner.
What is your view of Islam?
Islam is a very important world religion. There are many in the faith that are very gentle and loving people. There is also a faction of Islam that is very violent and wants to enforce their will upon the world. The violent segment needs to be resisted and crushed. I know that sounds strange for a person speaking of nonviolence, But you have seen what happens when the violent extremists are allowed to expand and control land areas. The people that practice Islam in the true tradition of their religion are very loving and wonderful people.
Okay. What was your opinion of Christianity?
I always had a very positive opinion of Christianity. I felt that Christianity could be a wonderful influence. The problem with Christianity when I lived as Gandhi was that they would try to take over other religions and control those other religions. Missionaries would come into countries and try to destroy all of the nationalistic tendencies and beliefs of those individuals. There have been times that Christianity has done much harm to countries. But all in all, Christianity is very positive for the world.
What is your view with respect to Palestine?
Palestine is a very difficult situation. I believe this is an instance where more would be gained from nonviolence than from the terrible violence that is taking place. Every time the Palestinians do an act of violence towards the Jewish state reacts with more violence. Once again, we see that violence begets violence. They would be much more successful if they used nonviolent protest, and the other governments of the world would perhaps come to their aid through sympathies for their plight. Unfortunately, there is so much hatred in that area, there is little hope of the two countries ever getting together.
What is your opinion on the equality of women?
Now that I am on the other side, I truly know that women and men are equals. When I walk the earth, I must admit that I believed that men were superior in their abilities and functions. Now that I am here, it is very clear that God's will is that men and women are equal. After all, a soul will reincarnate as a man in one lifetime and a woman in another. There's no logical reason why there should be a difference between them.
That's kind of the way I look at it too. What was your opinion concerning the caste system?
The caste system in India was very, very difficult for the people. There were certain classes of people that were absolutely unable to gain in status, and many were destined to live lives of poverty. I would like to see the caste system abolished. I would like to see all people have the opportunity to better themselves and not be looked down upon by those that consider themselves more elite.
Yeah. Do you think your concept of a nonviolent state would work today?
That is hard to say. I think that nonviolence is a very effective way of gaining political favor. I also accept the fact that a modern state has to defend itself and protect its borders. So nonviolence is an effective tool for gaining political equality, but there becomes a time that a military is required in order to maintain the status of the country.
Okay. Do you plan to reincarnate?
I will do what my God wishes me to do. When the time comes that He wants me to return, I will of course return in the role that He sees fit for me. I know that there will be a time, and it may not be too far in the future, that I return to attempt to cure some of the ills that is facing your earth today.
Do you have a final message for us?
I would like to thank Barry and Connie for the ability to have come through to speak to those of you listening. I want you to know that God is all-powerful and watches over those who are walking on your planet. I want you to know that you are facing times of great political problems. It is a time that individuals should consider my nonviolent approach. For instance, we are currently seeing violence and rioting in your country. If those people would adopt nonviolent practices and work towards obtaining the sympathy of the people, they would be much more successful. I thank you for the opportunity of speaking tonight, and I hope that your world becomes a more peaceful and safer place. So with that, I am going to say good night, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for coming for us.
Thank you very much, Gandhi, for coming through. Many of your principles would work well today, and it would be a great time for some of the people to listen to your teachings. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, Gandhi. Thank all of you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And with that, we're going to say good night.
And God bless you.